Hey, why are you acting like it's normal to show up? Auntie, I told you to skip my wedding. My niece sneered as she asked me not to attend her wedding. Ever since my brother passed away 11 years ago, I had raised her like she was my own daughter. But there was a reason she suddenly started hurting such harsh words at me. My name is Effie, and my brother, Jason, was 12 years older than me. Jason was a kind soul. When we were young, he'd hold my hand as we ran errands, help me practice riding my bicycle, and shower me with love. The year I entered middle school was also the year my beloved brother got married and moved out. I remember Jason and his wife's wedding being full of joy. I clapped so hard my palms ached. The following year, a baby girl was born to Jason and his wife, Mary. Being the youngest in the family, I was thrilled to have a little sister-like figure in my life. We named her Heidi, and I loved her as much as my brother had loved me. Even after Heidi was born, my brother and his wife continued to dote on me, and from middle school to high school, I frequently visited their home and spent time as a part of their family. While sitting at lunch one day, I thought to myself that I hadn't seen Heidi in a while. I was now 27 years old and working for a major fruit wholesale company, directly dealing with fruit farmers for various regions. I was not initially familiar with agriculture, but I learned a bit each day by listening to the voices of the producers, and I was now a leading staff among the employees, trusted with guiding my colleagues. One stormy day, I received sudden news that shocked me. That day, a typhoon was approaching, and we finished work a bit earlier than usual. Still, the weather outside was incredibly violent during my commute home, with gusts of wind so powerful they threatened to carry me away. It was on such a stormy day that my brother, under the orders of his boss, had been forced to go out on sales rounds. Jason was very earnest and hardworking. Even on that day, he was trying to make sales even in the adverse weather and didn't slack off. As he walked through the strong wind, a sign from a building fell and struck him directly. I heard about my brother's death, and I somehow managed to get my trembling legs to take me to the hospital. By the time I arrived, everyone was already there, and my parents were hunched over, crying silently. Seeing my parents crying and the painful sight of my brother, I couldn't help but shed tears, even though I still couldn't believe what had happened. Even though I understood the situation, the reality was too hard to accept. I sat next to my brother and cried. I noticed Mary and Heidi, Jason's wife and daughter, looking as if they were in a daze, not sobbing but simply staring blankly at the wall. Thinking it best to leave them be, I felt so sorry for them. From then on, we supported each other as a family even more than before. Mary, who is currently on leave from work, was a part-time worker within the scope of dependent support, and she will need a job in the future to sustain her life. My parents and I decided to support Heidi and Mary's future, including her re-employment with all our might. About a year after the funeral, Mary, who had returned to part-time work, decided to move because the rent was becoming too much for her current income. She had received compensation and workers' compensation insurance from Jason's company due to the accident at work. And of course, we agreed with Mary's prudent decision. But on the day of the move, when we went to help, we found only Heidi crying in the somewhat tidied room. Heidi holding a letter that said her mother couldn't raise her on her own, was only 16 years old. It seemed that Mary had called us to help with the move to ensure her daughter was taken care of after she left. Reading the letter, I felt a tightness in my chest, wondering if Mary had been so anxious that she wanted to run away after Jason's death. From the contents of the letter and what Heidi told me, it seemed that Mary believed it would be better for Heidi to be raised by our family than by her, who was economically unstable. Although it said she was thinking of Heidi first, what she did was equivalent to abandoning her high school daughter. Of course, I was angry at Mary, and we even went to search for her at her parents' house. However, the people who came out of the house were a family we didn't know, and we learned that not only Mary but also her parents had moved. We contacted Mary's relatives, but there was no family willing to live with Heidi, who was a high school student and had the prospect of significant expenses for college. As a result of our discussions, we decided to take care of Heidi in my house with the support of my parents. Despite the difficult times, Heidi smiled and said, "Effie, please take good care of me." And I hugged her tightly. 11 years have passed since then, and Heidi graduated from college and found a job at a local company. When she brought up a serious conversation, I felt the passage of time and nodded. "You're 27 now, after all." Seeing that, Heidi blushed a little and said, "Effie, I'm getting married." She met her boyfriend through a friend, and he was 1 year older than Heidi, and he seemed like a gentle and fine young man from the pictures. According to Heidi, he really cares about her, and although he is usually reliable, he can be a bit off at times, and she likes that part of him too. I was really happy and repeated congratulations so many times that Heidi was amazed. The man seems to be quite busy, and I haven't met him face to face yet. Heidi would try to set up dates for me to see him, but it always falled on days that I was busy. But in spite of her boyfriend's busy schedule, he actively participated in the wedding preparations, and Heidi seemed truly happy. When they shared with me that their ideal plan was beyond their budget, I remember my brother's wonderful wedding. I wanted Heidi to have the most memorable wedding, one that would make her happy for the rest of her life. I provided financial support as much as possible and looked forward to a ceremony filled with Heidi's dreams. On the long-awaited wedding day, as it was time to leave, I urged Heidi to prepare and made my final check on my belongings. I couldn't afford to make a mistake at my daughter's grand event, so I checked multiple times before finally setting off. As I followed Heidi down the hallway, I was already filled with so many emotions. Just the sight of her in her wedding dress was enough to make me tear up. I thought that both the groom and his parents, as well as my late brother in heaven, might laugh at me if they saw me crying so much. Still, I found these moments of contemplation to be a joy. Just as we got to the front door, Heidi turned around abruptly. She smiled gently at me and said, Don't come, Auntie. Huh? I'm telling you to not attend my wedding, Aunt Effie. I stared at Heidi, unable to comprehend what she had just told me. She burst out laughing at my confusion. Why do you think you have the right to attend my wedding? No matter how much you did for me, to replace my mother, you're still my aunt, an outsider, right? There's no way I can introduce you as my mother to my guests. The words spoken by my niece, whom I had lived with and cherished for over 10 years, were shockingly hurtful. Indeed, I am not her biological mother. No matter how much time has passed, Heidi never called me her mom. The reality that to Heidi, her only mother was Mary, finally hit me again. I was left speechless by Heidi's words, which she uttered with a smile. There was a moment when I thought, despite having raised her this far, but I realized it was a one-sided and arrogant sentiment. It is indeed regrettable that I cannot witness my daughter's grand event. But if this is for Heidi's happiness, I will do as she says. Suppressing my feelings, I told her that I understood, and gave her my blessings, and decided to absent myself from the wedding. Several hours later, Heidi returned home while I was still recovering from the shock. She came into the living room laughing cheerfully, and to my surprise, behind her was Mary, who had disappeared 11 years ago. Long time no see, Effie. You've aged a lot. Mary, who made quite a light-hearted entrance, extended her hand towards me the moment she saw my speechless face. I'm sure you know that my daughter got married. Give us a gift. $10,000 will do. You'll be down to offer Heidi that amount, right, Auntie Effie? Her red lipstick-clad mouth curled into a smirk. Heidi, standing next to Mary, echoed her mother's words with a similar smile. As they urged me to cough up the money quickly, the two started revealing a shocking truth. In fact, Mary's disappearance was a scheme to freely spend the insurance money and the funds from my brother's company. Mary, who had been working part-time and left the household finances to my brother, seemed to have completely changed after suddenly coming into a lot of money. Although she had never been poor, she became stingy about spending the money she had acquired, even on her daughter. Once she realized that she could control everything, her greed led her to use me, a single woman with a stable life, to raise Heidi so she could save on major expenses like college tuition. And terrifyingly, this all was a farce that Heidi was aware of. Only our family thought Mary had disappeared. She and Heidi were secretly contacting each other on their phones to prevent us from finding out, and they eventually started meeting once a month. When Heidi became a college student, her spending increased dramatically, and I heard she had started a part-time job, but in reality, she was receiving pocket money from Mary and hanging out. For Heidi, who was in her partying phase, Mary, who gave her money and let her do as she pleased every month, was undeniably the best mother. That's why Heidi coldly laughed. She deliberately refused to call me mom, knowing how much I loved her as my daughter. After Mary finished revealing the truth about her disappearance, she laughed mockingly and said, "Oh, did you perhaps use up all your savings and can't afford a gift anymore? But well, it was a more lavish ceremony than expected, so I'm proud, as a mother who supported her financially for her wedding. Right, Auntie?" Mom, you're so mean. From now on, you should say for yourself. I absolutely won't take care of you after your retirement. It was fun being your pretend daughter, but bye-bye now. The two of them laughed heartily, stating that they would take the wedding expenses as a combination of a wedding gift and severance payment. They declared to cut off ties with me and left the house, claiming to attend their after party and dinner with friends. Left behind, I was too overwhelmed by shock to comprehend the events of the past 11 years. About 30 minutes later, my parents arrived. They had been shocked at the wedding when Mary appeared as Heidi's mother, but didn't want to ruin their granddaughter's big day, so they stayed put until the ceremony ended. Afterwards, they had been looking for Mary. Unable to find her and unable to reach me, they decided to check on me at home. Seeing my parents, I broke down in tears. When I tearfully confessed everything about Heidi and Mary's scheme, my parents were furious. However, even if my parents wanted to talk directly, it seemed that Heidi had already switched off her phone and we couldn't reach her. We could have tried to locate Heidi through Jason's family, but we had raised Heidi because we wanted to. Confronting them would make us feel better because we never expected anything in return. We could have hired a lawyer to claim back my money, but I just didn't have the courage to sue my own daughter, whom I had cherished and raised for over 10 years. After discussing the situation, we decided to let it go, as they wished. We decided to sever our ties and bury everything in the past. Once free from the situation, I took the bold step of resigning from the company I had been working for and started my own fruit wine manufacturing business. I used domestically produced fruit that could be sold due to irregular shapes or fruits that were partially damaged due to weather conditions to develop and produce my products. My new venture, which I started with the idea of reducing fruit waste while still working at my previous company, gradually gained support from not only farmers but also various supporters due to the growing concern about food waste. Though it was challenging as I embarked on this new journey, the connections I made during my corporate career helped me immensely, and I made steady progress. The business that initially ran at a loss slowly started to increase its sales over 3 to 5 years, and the consistent growth made it a company to watch in the industry. One day, Heidi suddenly visited my office. She was already crying when she arrived and ran towards me as soon as she spotted me. Surprised, but not wanting to cause a scene, I took her into the reception room. Effie, I'm really sorry for everything. I've reflected on my actions and I need your help. I'm still like a daughter to you, right? After all, we lived together for such a long time. I'm really in trouble, Effie. Please help me financially. A woman, now well over 30, sobbed like a toddler. A receptionist who Heidi seemed to have pushed past arrived out of breath with several other staff members, all trying to drag Heidi out of the office. Watching this scene, I felt disheartened. She was, after all, after my money. According to Heidi, by the time Mary had appeared before me, she had almost exhausted all the money she had. Unaware of this, newlyweds Heidi and Jason expected support from Mary and willingly invited her to live with them. Initially, their life together seemed to go well, but everything changed when they built a new house. Heidi's husband took out a hefty loan to build a house with unique architectural features, expecting his mother-in-law to pay for it. Heidi wanted a kitchen with the latest equipment, and Mary, assuming her son-in-law was well off, chose the best from wallpapers to lighting for her room. Their loan turned out to be a heavy burden as everyone was relying on someone else's money. To make matters worse, their lifestyle was beyond their means, and Mary's money was already depleted. Even so, Mary, claiming to have given Heidi enough pocket money, started asking for money and never worked. This drove Jason to gambling out of stress from his mother-in-law's outrageous behavior. Unbeknownst to Heidi and Mary, Heidi's husband even accrued debt under their names, leaving their household finances in shambles, regardless of how much Heidi worked. We're now trying to sell the house as his parents suggested, but we can't find any buyers. Mom gets fired every time she tries to work, and both my husband and I are exhausted from working overtime every day. You're the only one I can rely on, Effie. If I'm not happy, Dad wouldn't be able to rest in peace either, right? Heidi, desperately appealing to me, reached her hand out while being escorted by my staff, smearing her face with tears and snot as she asked for money. I was slightly relieved to find that my heart was unmoved by this spectacle. The matter of this mother and daughter had firmly become a thing of the past in my mind. Finally, I broke my silence. Do you have an appointment, ma'am? Our company is not a financial institution, so we cannot lend money to strangers. If you're in trouble, please consult a bank or consumer finance company. Stunned, Heidi was lost for words when I turned back her own phrase. Stranger. That one had pushed me to the abyss of despair. Maybe she thought that if she cried and pleaded, she would get help. I followed my staff and led Heidi to the company's entrance. When she still wouldn't budge, I gently pushed her shoulder, guiding her a step outside the entrance. Realizing that I was never going to be her ally, for the first time, Heidi called me Mom. I don't have a daughter, I said. My words must have struck her hard as she turned white and ran away. After that incident, I started receiving spam texts from Heidi and Mary, which all centered around the dire financial situation. I ignored them all, but they persistently requested money or a loan. Seeing this, it's clear that they are struggling under a crushing debt. It would be a nuisance if they call my company's front desk, even if I block their calls. So I'm receiving a bunch of texts, but I have no intention of ever replying. If they ever send something to my company, I might sue them for business obstruction. Finally recovering, I've decided to move abroad to expand my business and study to make better wines. It seems I won't have to face those two for a while, and with anticipation for my new environment, I'm dedicating myself to work every day.